Ashmore, and welcome to the Mindset Exchange. Today, we have a very special guest joining us. Kirsty Harrison is not only a registered nutritionist, but also a beacon of inspiration. We will delve into a wide array of themes, from career transitions to overcoming setbacks to reinforcing positive changes. Please be aware that the topics of fertility, miscarriage, and timing of sex might be mentioned. Our guest shares her personal journey as well as the impact of nutritional mindset. We'll uncover strategies for staying motivated, the importance of accountability, and how to manage overwhelm. So, whether you're seeking to make a positive change in your life or simply curious about the connection between what we eat and how we think, you're in for a treat. Without further ado, let's welcome Kirsty to the show. Kirsty, welcome. It's so lovely to have you here. Thank you for being here. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting.
It is. It's a huge pleasure to have you. So before we get cracking and talking about how nutrition can help mindset a bit further, would you mind sharing a bit with everyone how you got into being a nutritionist?
I got into nutrition quite a long time ago now, when I've got 3 children, twin boys who are now 19 and a 12-year-old, and one of my twins developed quite bad psoriasis. And we were going to the doctors and the NHS were being amazing, but the treatment on his sort of porcelain skin seemed really harsh to have this light therapy, steroid cream. It just didn't feel right to me. So I started researching into alternative ways that we could support him. And with nutritional changes, managed to clear it up. I mean, he very rarely gets a psoriasis flare now. And that was it. I was decided that was what I wanted to do. I thought if there was natural approaches to things, I want to learn all about it. So I went back to college and retrained to become a nutritional therapist.
That is just amazing. And it must have been quite a lot to learn, really, when you're going through this change with a child as a parent. I mean, what came up for you at the time?
It was, I think I was just really pleased that we'd managed to help him without having to go down the medical route. And it really was a light bulb moment for me, as if to say, come on, guys, we don't need to, there's an alternative way. It doesn't have to be this route. There's not just one route. There's alternatives to everything. So, and I think whilst the medical approach is right for so many different things, I think it was a real light bulb moment for me that this was something that it didn't have to be that way. I've also got lots of cardiovascular disease in the family, and I was very conscious of my own health. That came up for me, wanting to make sure that I put myself in the best possible health and prevented any of those things happening, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, all that kind of thing I want to avoid, much like anyone. And so learning about it felt like a really sensible option.
When you started, how did you go about it?
A lot of asking Google in the first instance. Was the first report of call, much like anything. But then I quickly realised that to make changes like that, and I learned about nutritional therapy, is very much rooted in science and evidence-based, and that if I wanted to try things, I wanted to check that they had some kind of evidence behind them. I do think there's an argument that anecdotal things that have worked for other people, anecdotal evidence is useful as well, but I was quite mindful of, I wanted it to have had some kind of research behind it. Like I was messing around with my child's health. I was potentially taking food greens away. So therefore I needed to be aware of other food, what I needed to do to replace those nutrients that he was missing from me taking that. So there was a lot of things I had to consider. And that was pretty much, so a lot of Googling initially, and then a lot of looking at the research, trying to get my head around research papers, and that took a lot of doing because that's not something I was used to before. And then when I wanted to find a college, I sort of looked at the best one closest to me and worked out how I could make that work around my kids and around my job and all that kind of stuff.
That is so inspiring, Kirsty. And for anyone who has a sick child that's in this position, how did you keep going throughout all of this?
Well, with the sort of making, I mean, he himself wasn't overly bothered by it. I think but I knew he would when he got older, because it's very visibly on his skin. It was quite bad in his hair. And I knew as he got older, that would bother him. So that sort of kept me focused. I want the best for him kind of thing. And then the nutrition side of things and managing to stay focused whilst working, that was incredibly hard and was a real test of my resilience, because I found it very overwhelming trying to retrain whilst working with young children.
And what did you used to do?
I worked in accounts for 20 years. I worked looking after the accounts of the property investment company in London, which I actually think wasn't the most exciting profession in the world, but has actually really stood me quite good ground for what I do now. Like, I'm quite practical, methodical, attention to detail, all the kind of things that you need to be able to do accounts is really quite useful when you're doing nutritional therapy as well. How I like to think about it.
So when you think about, not that anyone would want any child to be sick, but when we're thinking about your career progression and the choices you've made, what you've seen, that you've taken some positives out of that have actually been really, really useful for what you do now. Yeah. And that is quite interesting, the mindset that goes behind that. So if we think about what people mean by nutrition, for those who think, oh, you know, it's just about dieting, or maybe I just need to have a vitamin D tablet, what do people mean by nutrition, Kirsty?
I sort of think about this quite often, because I think a lot of people think nutritional therapy is that I'm going to go and see a nutritional therapist and they're just going to tell me to eat more vegetables. And I think that's generally what people think. And they're always quite surprised when it's more than that. But actually, it's so much more than that, because nutritional therapy is evidence-based. Like, we're not allowed, and nor should we want to, recommend things that aren't rooted in evidence. We are also, yes, we can do all the basic nutrition changes, making sure that you're hitting your food groups, making sure you're getting your nutrients. But on a sort of step up from that, we're also able to get wide variety of functional laboratory tests that are not widely available on the NHS, which can make our approach to helping you recover from something, or work on your fertility, or deal with your hormones, so much more targeted. We can be really specific because we're coming from a place of having laboratory tests, from having that information to hand. We are also able to spend so much more time working with clients and really helping them build their health back up. And I think that's really important. I'm trying to think what else we do. The testing, I think, is a big one. The NHS are absolutely amazing, but they're completely overwhelmed, and you get like 7 minutes with a GP, whereas an initial consultation with me is 90 minutes, and we go through everything because we're all interconnected. We need to look at the holistic whole approach. Oh, and we're much more looking at the root cause. We're not just going to give you something and go, well, go away, that'll make you feel better, because that's not looking about what's driving that condition or what's driving that reaction in your body. Yeah. We want to understand, always going deeper, always asking why, and really making sure that we are able to work at supporting you from the very root cause approach, rather than just putting a plaster over a situation and hoping it goes away.
That is really interesting what you're saying about all the different tests that you do. So if I was to go to a nutritionist, what would that involve? Like lots of blood tests or skin tests? What would it involve exactly?
Well, not necessarily. Very much is dependent on the individual. The thing with nutritional therapy is it really takes into consideration how different we are. What works for me won't work for you, and vice versa. And so quite often we don't decide on tests until we've had an initial consultation and we've drawn up we've got this big picture of what's bothering you, what's driving your concerns, what your goals are. And then if we need to do testing, we can do blood testing, stool testing, vaginal microbiome testing, just stress, that's hard to say, like cortisol response. There are huge amounts of tests that we can do, but it's important, I think, that we don't always rush to the testing because they're obviously expensive, and there's so much we can do prior to that. But yeah, blood tests, urine tests, saliva tests, stool tests, vaginal microbiome tests. There's lots of different testing options available that we can refer that are widely available on the NHS.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's about what is relevant and bespoke to the individual. So tell me, Kirsty, you see a lot of different types of presentations, different types of people, and you treat everyone individually. Can you give examples of different scenarios of what clients are like when they first see you, or where they like your advice in general?
I think when most clients, because I would say the majority of my clients are fertility clients, And so the general way they arrive to me is completely overwhelmed. They have done an awful lot of research. They know so much information about what they should and shouldn't be eating, what their hormones should be. They've really done the work. But almost sometimes it's like they have come across too much information. They don't know. It's overwhelming and they don't know where to start. They're doing a lot of the right things, but perhaps it's not benefiting them. I see a lot of clients arrive to me on an awful lot of supplements that almost are counteracting each other or haven't been checked against the medication. So a lot of my work, I think, particularly in that instance, is to make sure that it's to take that overwhelm away and to change their mindset, I suppose, from that of overwhelm to feeling much more calm and in control, because so much when it comes to your fertility is out of your control. So it's so I think it sometimes helps for you to feel like you're doing something that you can control. And I try and take them from overwhelmed to calm and in control, but that doesn't always work, but we try.
So for listeners out there where this might actually resonate with them, either they may be going through this journey or just having overwhelm in general, you can think of lots of different types of things in life that can cause overwhelm, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether it's being a parent, whether it's going through fertility issues amongst many. What sort of tools or techniques or approaches do you try, Kirsty?
Well, really break things down. I think it helps to break things down into like bite-sized, manageable pieces. And when I've worked with people myself in the past, I found that that's the best way that works for me. Like, I need to know that I can achieve this and consolidate that before going on to the next thing and trying to implement that. So that's the sort of basic way I will try and break things down. So we don't go in and tackle everything at once, because then that's just going to add to the overwhelm and make it really difficult and confusing. In fact, if anything, I sometimes think people think my initial plan is perhaps a bit too simple, because I've broken it. I want them to feel that sense of achievement before they then next go on to trying to add in the next thing and then the next thing. So I think people look at it and think, oh, I've paid this much money for this very basic information. But actually, in the long run, they see that when we add all those things in and we consolidate and then we add in, they've really overhauled their nutrition and their life and their way that they feel, but it hasn't been overwhelming or overcomplicated.
If one suffers from overwhelm, if you break it down into manageable chunks, if they're SMART goals, and what I mean by that, they're specific and measurable and realistic and accurate within a certain time, one can see goals being achieved. And that in itself brings about a lot of energy, inspiration, it builds confidence, it builds self-esteem. Would you say quite a journey then, or if you're working a lot with fertility, what they're like at the beginning of the journey and what they're like at the end of the journey? Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, I do think that. I think generally people do start to feel better and they start to feel more in control. And also, I think the thing with nutrition is it takes time. And the thing that we all have to understand when working in nutrition is that it takes time. And that can be incredibly frustrating. So really, when they start to see the changes happen, that's sort of when the magic happens, I guess, because they realise what they're doing is working and that it's starting and they just need to keep going, then things will improve more. I do think we do, towards the end of the programmes, I hope that people are starting to feel a lot more positive about things and with a lot better understanding of what's happening in their body, because we're not really taught very much about what goes on in our body as a rule.
No, and actually the more that's out there, and one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is hopefully to give a bit of insight around that. So I think one can't really underestimate that feeling of empowerment that you get when you start taking control of things. And so many things are out of our control, aren't they? Are there any particular misconceptions that you think are quite common that people show to you?
Yes, I think there's a lot of feelings of when we feel out of control, or in my experience, you feel out of control when either you don't know enough about a situation, or you know too much, or you're just general overwhelm. But so I think it's quite useful to help people understand what's happening, maybe. Like, for example, we're not really taught about our menstrual cycles. We've got really no idea what's going on. We're not taught at school about it. We don't really know that there's only potentially 6 days a month that you can fall pregnant. At school, I was told that I sort of understood if I so much looked at a boy, then I was going to be pregnant. My God, it's not that easy at all. So, so I think by explaining things, so many people don't know that though. And because I didn't know it, so I'm assuming loads of other people don't know it. So by giving them all that education, that gives them back the feeling of control and understanding and takes away the overwhelm. And so a lot of it is as well about educating people around what's happening and trying to get them to understand.
So if we're talking about control, and if you can within your own control, nutrition that can help that fertility or help the growth of the baby, then why wouldn't you? And is that something you also do? You talk about education with your clients?
Yeah, we do. When we talk about education and helping them understand why their body is behaving a certain way. So, and also, for example, going through blood test results, we can say, look, well, you're deficient in this and that you need this because these are the building blocks for this, or you need this in your diet because without all our sex hormones are synthesized from cholesterol. Now, I don't know about you, but I was brought up thinking fat was the enemy. So it took me a long time before I started. I don't think I ate any good fat until I was a nutritionist, you know, so there's, I had all sorts of problems with my own periods when I was younger, probably because I was avoiding fat and eating crap. So that kind of education is really important because especially women of my age, and like I was saying, fat was the enemy and we need it. So yeah, education I think is really important, and understanding that, but also not I don't like extremes. So I don't want people to go hardcore with their approach. Like, it's about balance, and to get people to stay on the journey and to keep moving forward, you can't be restrictive.
So you work with clients who do have or may have been sold certain diets which they thought would work. How do you get around that with them, Kirsty?
We have to explain to them how that it has such a negative. You don't want to go, oh, you shouldn't have done this because of that. But you do need to explain that the sort of long-term effect. It's essentially malnutrition. You know, you're not eating, you're hugely restricting food groups. You don't have the right building blocks to then create the hormones, to create to support your mental health, all of those things. So you really do have to go back and say, we can fix this because we can work towards restoring those nutrient levels, but it is going to be hard. I mean, there was a time when we were eating the cabbage soup diet for weeks, and I just felt untold damage that must have caused long term. It's something else. But we have to be very careful because clean eating is also, orthorexia is also a massive thing now, and people eating clean is to the detriment of the sort of, where it becomes an obsession is obviously then an eating disorder as well. So we do have to be quite mindful. I'm not trained to work with anyone with an eating disorder, so therefore I have to refer. And you do see a lot of disordered eating coming through now as a sort of, presumably because of the way we've been.
And what is clean eating for those people who don't know what it involves?
I think essentially it's just being very, very controlling of the food that you're eating, and it only being sort of good for essentially what would be deemed good for you. So, and if it becomes an obsession and it becomes unhealthy and there's no balance at all, then that's leaning towards orthorexia, which would then be considered an eating disorder.
Thinking about what we were talking about, you mentioned earlier that it can actually take longer than people think to go through this journey to get back onto a balanced nutrition that's more in tune with their own bodies and needs. So how do you go about helping your clients stay motivated?
Accountability, I find quite useful. Like that, people seem to progress more or be able to stick to their plans if you have more regular checkups with them. I guess in a way that's how the old sort of models kind of worked, is you had to go and stand on the scales in front of someone and it made you either feel great or it made you feel crap. And I'm not saying that that's the right way of doing it, but accountability is definitely a factor. So I think it's good to have regular checkups. So my package clients I try and see every other week because it keeps them on an even keel, and we're able to say, look at all the good things you've achieved, because you can get bogged and much likely to listen to the negative messaging, aren't we, than the positive messaging that our mind's putting out. So I think it's good to reinforce those positive changes as often as possible to keep people motivated.
And that's right. And the brain is interesting. The brain works where it tends to focus on the negative things out of control, rather than actually focusing on the positive things. And this is where neuro quite interesting, where you're actually retraining the brain to focus on the positive and feeding it positive messaging, not because one's is ignoring the emotions or feelings that people might feel, but because actually it's helping the brain sorry, to focus on unity and getting out of potentially a negative mindset. And when you're faced with clients that maybe are feeling down about their weight, as you focus on fertility, about conception or conceiving, how do you help them try and reframe things into more of a positive mindset?
I'm quite a positive person, so I do try. I'm very much glass half full. And I try and put that. Well, hopefully it comes across naturally anyway. But particularly with fertility, because there's so much grief and so much loss, and I think I would generally refer on to a counsellor. And I think the two, between the nutrition and the counselling side by side, that can be really powerful support. And then taking in things like acupuncture as well, and really throwing everything at it from a holistic point of view can be really supportive. But I do sometimes feel a bit like it's very hard to sit with. I guess this is more about my own mindset, I guess, but sometimes I find it very hard to sit with people's sad. Like I really carry that. I take that away with me. Like I really feel it. When you work with people for 12 weeks or for 6 months and something awful happens to them, it's really hard not to take that on yourself. So yeah, I had to do quite a bit of learning on how to close my office door, try and let it go. Otherwise, I think I'm with sad stuff all the time.
It's quite hard, isn't it, to try and distance oneself emotionally, those sort of things. And what have you found that has helped you with that?
I found it quite useful to have a separate workspace. I know that sounds probably really basic, although I'm a big fan of the basic things. But just being able to that closure of shutting the door and going, right, I've left work now and move on. I like to try, or don't always like to try and get out and get in the fresh air after work. So for that sort, and listen to a podcast or just do something to take my mind off it. I think it's also really useful to have a community around you as well of people going through the same thing as you. So I've got a couple of WhatsApp groups with other nutritional therapists in. I work with the Fertility Nutrition Centre. 2 teams there. We can all share what we're going through. And much like with anything, sharing seems to talking. It's good to talk. And you can just say, oh, I've just had a really shit time. I need to talk about this. And having someone there who understands and gets it is really important, and they're really helpful.
And support can play such a key area in these sort of things, whether it's peer support, whether it's the support structure of your close friends and family, whether it's a life coach like me, just being able to find a path through to change into having more of a growth mindset or positive mindset. And in fact, supports that having peer support reduces stress as well. It's really important wherever one is, if ever you have overwhelm, wherever there are things in your work are quite overwhelming, to have and reach out to look to peer support that's relevant to you, or a network where people are going through similar things to you and can say, well, actually, have you tried this? This is what I tried, or just compare. We talked about how you help your clients stay motivated. We talked about how you have learned how to manage with the different parameters of everything that comes through the doors. How do you help your clients overcome any setbacks? Because that must happen as well.
It does. We have a lot of setbacks because, like with anything, it's never straightforward. It is never. I mean, you get the rare occasions where it's nice and easy breezy, but more often when it gets to the stage that I'm working with them, things are you do get setbacks. So I think it's a really difficult one, but I think it is just going back to the drawing board, looking at what I think that comes back to my methodical, practical side as well, where you come back to the drawing board, we talk about what we've done, we've talked about what we can still do to move forwards, and then we build a new action plan of how to move forwards. And I think that's really useful to say, look, okay, we've done all these tests and we've done this and we've tried this approach. there's still so much more that we can do. And I think that then helps pick people back up to go, okay, this is not the end of the road. There's still more that we can do. Let's push on.
Absolutely. There's more that we can do, and reflecting on what might not have worked and trying new things. Could you share a potential case study with us of a client who's had that journey and what you tried with her, maybe, and what light bulb moment she had, or and they had a mindset shift?
They all sort of follow a similar path, really. And it's the first light bulb moment is often understanding their menstrual cycle. It really is. It like people are like, oh my goodness, so that's why I've not fallen pregnant. I've been having sex on entirely the wrong day for my cycle. That's usually the first light bulb moment. Okay, I've got one client in mind who came to me, I think maybe had one miscarriage, completely exhausted all the time. We ran some blood tests. We've run some microbiome testing. We've worked on all of those things over, I think, probably 4 months in the end. And gradually, as we work through each thing, we've then managed to get her to a place where she's now got a baby and is trying for her second baby. So I think it's difficult. It's quite difficult because everyone's so different. But yeah, that sort of case study there is really like, it was nutrient deficiencies to start with. And then there was an infection. And it's just that unpicking constantly looking, because unexplained infertility is not a thing. It just means no one's found the reason yet, really. So you just need to keep digging. And that's what I do with each of my clients, is we just keep digging until we get to the what's going on. And it doesn't work for everybody because the world is unfair. But and the majority of the times it's successful.
It's just amazing what we can do nowadays. You touched on nutrient deficiencies. How might different nutrients or vitamin deficiencies appear in clients?
So I guess the sort of more obvious one would be extreme fatigue, would be sort of regular iron deficiency, vitamin B12 deficiency. Then we also look quite a lot, folate comes up quite a lot. These would also affect mindset as well, because if you're constantly fatigued all the time, it's quite hard to be positive, I think, if you can't understand why you can't drag yourself out of bed and all that kind of stuff. Also the nutrient deficiencies. I mean, also not necessarily a nutrient deficiencies as such, but if you've got gut dysbiosis, that can affect your nutrient absorption. So then you don't have the relevant cofactors and relevant nutrients and enzymes available to build your hormones, build your neurotransmitters. You don't have all the relevant things there, and that can hugely affect how we feel and happiness or positive mindset that we might have, for sure. But I think gut-brain axis is not to be overlooked, and what we eat and how it affects our mind is really intrinsically linked.
And you mentioned with the gut that the absorption might be impacted. And how's that picked up? Is that through the stool testing, or how do you test it?
Yeah, we do stool testing, but you can usually tell quite a lot by symptoms as well. So whether they've got a slow transit time, whether they're going for passing a stool regularly, whether they've got too fast a transit time, whether they're suffering from bloating, abdominal discomfort. There's lots of different, like excessive wind, lots of things that you could look at initially and go, well, hold on, there's not something going on here. We then would look to work on it via nutrition and supplements. But if progress isn't made, then we would look at stool testing to understand whether there's a sort of pathogen or opportunistic bacteria or something going on down there that could be impacting absorption. And it can take quite a long time for your nutrient stores to deplete as well. So you might not notice things at first going awry, but eventually cascade of things not being absorbed catches up on you, and then you suddenly get completely flawed, or you develop an autoimmune condition, or there's an awful lot that can be going on. But yeah, stool test generally would be how we pick it up, and use very targeted nutritional support.
So it's very varied what you do, and also different mindsets that you're dealing with your clients. And is that something you had to work on a lot, or is that something you're taught when you train to be a nutritionist?
Oh, no one teaches you that whatsoever. There's lots of things they don't teach you. They don't teach you how to run a business in any way, which would be useful. And yes, they don't teach you about the mental sort of load, I guess, side, or the mental. Yeah, no, that's something we've had to learn along the way, and something your first few clients is completely overwhelming and sort of huge. It's just difficult, I've had people in floods of tears for hours, and it can be quite. But then also, I see the positive sides where everyone's really joyful and it's exciting and it's positive, which is more often. Occasionally, you get a very teary ones. Yeah, no one teaches you that. That's that's something you have to learn on the way.
It's a learn on the job.
Very much a learn on the job, yes.
You talked about you learning on a job. Have you used any particular resources or books that you found helpful?
I can't think of any specific books that I've read. I did go through a phase of reading a lot of books. I actually find podcasts more useful because I like to be able to listen while I'm out walking the dog. That's quite a good way of me learning things. I listen to quite a lot of nutrition podcasts. From a mindset perspective, I think from having my own life coaching many years ago was quite useful, from generally seeing how and learning from other practitioners and how they deal with things. That's particularly useful. But book-wise, I have got hundreds of books behind me. But I can't think of any specific I have read that have been, oh yes, that was very useful.
Yeah. Adam, at the beginning of this podcast, about how your own personal journey was mainly via your son, and that was overcoming a sort of an obstacle really as a parent. Can you share a time where you faced adversity and how your mindset played a role in bouncing back stronger?
Yeah, oh goodness me, I've had many a near-death experience that I've overcome from various illnesses and operations and hospitalizations that have taught me to be resilient. But I would think probably, apart from parenting, the biggest thing that has taught me the most about how to be resilient and how to keep putting one foot in front of the other is running my own business. It's incredibly, like I was saying, no one taught me in college how to do that. All the different hats you have to wear. I mean, you have to do your own marketing and your own accounts and you still have to do your CPD to keep learning. There's so many different things to take into consideration of how to grow your business and how to do all of that. I think that has probably been what's taught me the most over the last few years about, how to build resilience, because it's hard. And also if you have a client that doesn't go right, or which are few and far between, but when they don't, it really knocks your confidence, and having to pick yourself up and get back in the game is really hard after that, because you feel like because you're dealing with people's actual lives, so you can take it really personal. It can really knock your confidence if something doesn't go right. Luckily that's not happened to me. We've had a few where people haven't reached the goal of the family they want, but rarely has anything awful happened. But that sort of thing, really having to pick yourself up and stay motivated when you want to crawl into bed and never get up, not having it has probably taught me an awful lot over the last few years, and about how strong I can be.
Thank you for sharing that. And thinking back on that and what it's taken you, what is it that you found has helped you just put one step in front of the other and keep going despite all these obstacles?
I really want to be really good at my job. And I think I never used to have this when I did accounts, but I do seem to have it now. I want to be an expert in my field. I want to help people. I want to really help families and people and women and men reach their goals. That's really important to me. And I think that's what keeps me going. Like I want to help people. And I want to be good at what I do, and that helps me keep going when I'm working late at night when I should be taking my own advice and resting.
So what I'm hearing is you have a real passion for what you do. How is that different from your previous job? Or maybe I should rephrase that and ask you, is it different from your previous job?
I was actually talking to my friend about this when she came down to stay at Easter. And what I don't have now is the Sunday scaries. When you used to really dread Sundays, where I would lie in bed and think, oh God, I've got this huge to-do list on my God, I get these accounts finished by then, and it would just fill me with dread. I don't get that anymore. I love what I do, and sometimes I'll catch myself working on a Sunday and I'm fine because it's my job and I love it. And I'm constantly learning new things and I'm constantly helping people. And if that's the biggest change between that and my other job, what I do miss is the regular salary and the and the thing. But, this far outweighs the that at the moment.
You have a real passion for what you do. And when you have this passion, then the work that you're doing will feel like a chore and you don't dread doing it and you don't get the Sunday scaries. Do you think, on reflection, when you think back about your career journey, what do you think the next step's going to be for you going forwards?
The next step for me going forward would be to definitely take on or to have work with me other nutritional therapists under the umbrella, or even other modalities at some stage, and offer some kind of bigger practice where we can help more people and we can get to more people. That would be really good. That's the sort of next step, is to start looking at someone to help. There's also I'm based in Cornwall now, and whilst I work worldwide, actually, but there's very limited information and resources available to people on their fertility journey down in the southwest. And I think I would like to be able to try and get to more people down here and give more of a community-based, be more present in the community so that people know there's somewhere to ask for help if they need to, and to point them in the right direction of things. It feels a bit cut off down here, but I feel like people aren't as aware as to perhaps if you were based in a city, or I'd like to share that information with them.
The possibilities are endless. Is there anything that you would do differently?
Yes, I would have left my job sooner, because I was terrified of leaving my full-time job to go into full-time nutrition. I was doing both side by side for a very long time, and I didn't have the confidence and belief that I could get this off the ground. So I would have tried to encourage myself to do that sooner. I think we can get very comfortable, can't we? You must see this a lot in your work. I would also say that you have to get comfortable with that a feeling of that you don't know everything about your job. Like, the more you learn in nutrition, the more you realise you don't know. So, because as soon as you learn one thing, it then throws up a whole load of other information that you also need to learn. So I think you need to get comfortable with that. I think as soon as you feel like you know everything, you should probably stop training, stop practicing. So we're getting comfortable with that feeling, not being overwhelmed, but not knowing everything, and it being okay to ask for help is, I think, what I would tell anyone, or myself, starting this journey again.
It's a lovely note to finish, actually, that it's okay to ask for help or support.
Also, the other thing I would say is life is for living, and you need to enjoy food, and it's okay to eat pizza and have a glass of red wine, and it's about balance. It's just okay to make sure that you're enjoying yourself at the same time. It doesn't have to be all one way. A balanced diet is what you want to be aiming for, not an extreme.
I love that, Kirsty. And life is for living, and it's all about having a balanced diet. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to chat.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of the Mindset Exchange. Your support means the world to me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you rate, leave a review, and subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every Monday, so you can use them throughout the week. If you want to continue this conversation or share your takeaways, I would love to hear from you. Head on over to my Instagram at Katherine Ashmore _ and comment on your favourite part. Remember, if you need support with any of the themes covered today or in previous episodes, don't hesitate to contact me. My details are in the blurb. Next week, I will be delving into the fascinating topic of control and perfectionism. I can't wait to continue this journey with you and for you to tune in next time. See you then.